Rabbi Sai, happy Pesach. Something really weird happened. I made a video that was using Jewish sprach, Jewish jargon, the sort of ultra-Orthodox jargon that I grew up on. And I ended up speaking primarily, not necessarily to those people, but to a mixed multitude of them and everybody else for the next 3.5 hours. I was told that I should edit that. It was a good 3.5 hours, but that's just not how people communicate these days. Well, something interesting happened. I did start to edit it, and then my phone stopped working, and I didn't have it with me for 2 weeks. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish that piece that is edited, sight unseen and unwatched. And then, still sight unseen and unwatched, I'm going to add something that I thought over Passover. My inspiration here, by the way, is Ma titzak elai, daber b'nei Yisroel v'yisol. So far, we all die. So far, time stops for no man. I've been torn between two philosophies in life. One of them is very, very, very much activist, and the other is very, very much not activist. Perhaps a Western understanding of Buddhism. Live in the moment, enjoy what is, don't do things very purposefully, don't go for things, etc. Well, when I was a young man in my early 20s, I was very much the activist. We are on YouTube. YouTube is not generally known by most people as a place of great, great righteousness. Again, I'm speaking to Orthodox Jews right now. We'll get to the title of this in just a moment. I just want to say to these Orthodox Jews that with regard to the fact that here I am on YouTube wearing talis and tefillin, and people associate YouTube with kardoim lachbar boy, trying to make money or whatever else, you might have some doubts. I ask you to be dan lekaf zchus. That's what I ask. I ask you to be dan lekaf zchus. I once went to Rav Elyashiv. I had gone to other gedolim, other big important gedolim. I went to Rav Elyashiv with the matter of dinei nefashos. Dinei nefashos, as in that a Yid was being tortured to death and he was going to be murdered on Hitler's birthday unless XYZ. I had already spoken to all the secular authorities, including the head of the FBI in this matter of XYZ, including the head of Beis Yisroel who deals with these matters, including both chief rabbis of Israel. Finally, I decided that if I was going to have to do this on my own, well, I was going to need Rav Elyashiv to back me up on a matter of dinei nefashos that can cause life or death either way directly at my hand. I went to Rav Elyashiv, and he gave me a certain psak, not to do XYZ. The easier psak, the psak that I was relieved to receive. Nebuch, this Yid who was being tortured to death, who had his teeth pulled out, who had his fingers cut off. This Yid who was being tortured in the worst manners you can imagine, Nazis torturing people. I went to Yerushalayim in the great synagogue to an all-night collection of shiurim in English and in Hebrew. And I went to one shiur that dealt with this general subject. And I researched it afterwards, and I came to the conclusion that Rav Elyashiv, regardless of what das Torah means, but that Rav Elyashiv was halachically wrong, and therefore would be responsible for the murder of a man whom life I could save. All right, everyone who didn't understand any of this, I think you understand by now at least part of why it is that I'm only speaking to Orthodox Jews. But I do need to get your attention a little bit. So let me finish for one moment here with the Orthodox Jews, and then I'll get right back to you. You'll enjoy it, I promise, I promise, I promise, I promise, I promise you're going to like this stuff. Oof! And the more Jew-phobic you happen to be, the more you're going to love it. Finish off with the Jews. I went to Rav Scheinberg, and I discussed the matter with him. I did not tell him that I had spoken to Rav Elyashiv. I've spoken to other Rosh Yeshiva, as I mentioned earlier, but this is one where you have to speak to one of the gedolim. I was wearing jeans. It was Tainus Esther, and I climbed up to his third-story apartment. By the way, people who are not Orthodox Jews, you should know this. It's just an amazing thing. The most respected Orthodox Jews, those who people will follow what they say, those who will go to war or give away their money because this person says so. The most respected. I can't speak for today when I've been exploring other worlds, but I can speak for my day, 25 years ago. Those that were most respected lived the simplest of lives. For Rav Scheinberg, who was an old man, probably in his late 70s, maybe 80s, who was overweight and who also had the habit of wearing dozens of these every day. I mean, at the same time, something similar to this, not with the silver, but something similar to this all the time, constantly. You can imagine the amount of heat that puts on a person. And he was living in a third floor walk-up. Aside from the fact that he was a great genius, and if he wanted to devote himself to money, there's no doubt that he could have. All he would have asked to do is say, because of my health, I need whatever, and people would be begging for the honor to spend $1 billion on him, to get him the greatest comfort possible. World who was not from that community, whatever other weirdnesses and whatever else, just so you understand, there's a human greatness there that is real. You might think they're wrong or stupid, but they had that opportunity at the snap of the fingers, and don't do it. So I went to go see him. I davened with him, Mincha Maariv Tainas Esther, and I immediately went after him. Everyone's wishing him, a good ois Tainas, whatever. I went over to him. I was wearing jeans and I guess a t-shirt or whatever reason. I grew up very frum. I think that some of you might find it important to unlearn some of the things that you weren't necessarily taught correctly. Maybe. For many of you, not. If not, this definitely doesn't apply to you, and please don't watch it. And I went to Rav Scheinberg and I said, Rabbi, I need to speak to you and ask you a shaila. And he said, he was the sweetest man. Sweetest man is like in his 80s. And here I come from like totally outside of his world. You have to understand, in his world, every single person is wearing a black hat and a black jacket and a white shirt. Here I show up in jeans. So he says to me, today was a fast day. I didn't eat any food today since last night. So my wife is preparing a little food. Would you like to join us? You didn't know me from nothing, and I was as outsider as you could be. And I did end up joining him, but I said, first, no, Rebbe, first I need to speak to you. This is a matter of din and nefashis. Every second counted. You have to understand, should I spell it out for you, what it means for a person to be tied to a gurney and tortured in the worst ways possible, have his fingers cut off piece by piece, over months, have his teeth pulled out, all his teeth, so many other horrible things done to him by pure sadists, who was going to be murdered on Hitler's birthday, unless a few things took place, or so it seemed. Nothing in this life is certain, but I did a lot of research just the various things that can take place, including assassinations. I spoke to people who knew about those things, assassinations don't worry, the country doesn't exist anymore. It was Chechnya, if you must know. It was during the time when Chechnya was revolting against the Russians. I had people on my behalf go speak to Basayev and Maschadov before they came to their end. So I spoke to Rav Scheinberg, and he said, Halavai, if I were younger, I would help you. I'm Mekana your Olam Haba. And that's when I felt confident that even though what I had to do was incredibly difficult, it was what I wanted to do, what deep down I wanted to do. But at the same time, I knew that I can't go to a second opinion because I don't like the first opinion, because I think I know better. So I really know better than Elyashiv, right? Rav Elyashiv was, how do you even describe Rav Elyashiv? He knew his stuff and he was widely respected. And people believe, want to know what God's opinion is? Well, you can trust him more than anything, and that God won't let him go wrong even. He has Das Torah. How much Das Torah is still a concept in the frum world, I don't know exactly. But Das Torah was Das Torah in those days. I was able to call him, I spoke to him, and I told him that I had spoken to Elyashiv, and we had an interpreter, and I didn't think the interpreter gave all the information, but still, nonetheless, I accepted, of course, Das Torah. But recently I learned exactly the things I just told you. And I said, Rebbe, is it still okay if I, do what needs to be done in your name? Because in that world, as in many worlds, having authority is important, which I guess means that I should mention that I'm a rabbi. I have the credentials. Rav Scheinberg was nervous. He actually, and I feel, it hurts me to this day to say this, of course, that I actually caused this feeling to Rav Scheinberg, Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg. He was nervous. And he said, no, don't go do things, do this, do the following. I didn't really believe in this Das Torah business as much, but nonetheless, this was a matter where I might cause people deaths or save lives. And I wasn't willing to rely on not getting either Rav Elyashiv or Rav Scheinberg say so. Not even the chief rabbis would do, for the record. As many of you in the frum community know, Rav Elyashiv and Rav Scheinberg were considered more, in some ways, religiously respected than the two chief rabbis of Israel, who I spoke to, who gave me their support. That wasn't really the issue. It says nothing negative about them. However, it does say that, well, let's not go there. We don't have that much time. So Scheinberg said, call Elyashiv. And I said, call him. You can't call, I can't. Can you call him for me? Can you do me a favor? Can you call Elyashiv? You know, we discussed all this. Can you call him? And he wouldn't do it. I don't know why. He had just said that he was Makana my Olam Haba. To translate that, he just said, and this is someone who believes in the eternal afterlife, that he was jealous of my eternal afterlife, that he wished he could have my eternal afterlife because of what I was going to do. He said, Halavai, if I were younger, I would help you. If only I were younger, I would help you. He said, go meet Rav Elyashiv. Doesn't matter, just go meet him, just wait until you can see him when he steps out. Can't grab a second. You know, obviously he has his surrounders too, trying to protect him. He's an old man. A lot of people trying to get his attention, even for good reasons. And tell him everything you told me. That's it. Don't tell him what I said. Don't tell him what I said. Don't tell him what I said. I can't speak for that, and I won't speculate at the moment. Don't tell him what I said. Tell him all the same things you told me. I'm sure he'll change his psak. By the way, let me tell you from people, I'm Oretz Gomor. What? I'm saying that I know more Rav Elyashiv about anything? Well, that's not true. I'm not an Oretz Gomor. I should stop saying that. So I went to Elyashiv and I tried for a while, waiting outside. Finally, I had my opportunity. He was getting into a car. He had a driver. See that? A guy respected by 500 million people. At the age of 89, somebody will do him a favor and drive him a few blocks. That's the extent of what he was willing to take. He had a driver going, he was giving a class. And I got into the car. I said that I'm not leaving until I speak to Elyashiv. I was a kid. I was 20 years old. And I got Rav Elyashiv to change his psak. He was going to be killed on April 20th, Hitler's birthday. I saved the man's life. There are people alive today who have met him who can testify to this. I can't say exactly which various groups I got involved. And I had him captured from the mafia on Pesach, on the first day Pesach, when God took the Jews out of Egypt, and ever since then, all they've been doing is talking about it. You might be familiar with the Passover Seder. You know, the Passover Seder takes place once a year where the whole story of the Exodus is told over. Do you know that this that I'm wearing right over here, and this that I'm wearing right over here, discuss the redemption from Passover as well? I'm supposed to wear them every day. You're not supposed to talk about them and teach about them every day. Do you know that some of the most important of the Jewish laws in the entire Jewish Bible are to focus on this redemption? This man was freed on the one day of freedom in the year. That's what happened. During this time period, my entire life was dedicated to helping other people, and I believed it completely selfish to want to do anything for myself. It's a state that's impossible to describe in a short amount of time. We only have a short amount of time. Let me tell you the story about Moshe. I am not a fan of names, personally, but of all the different names that I have been called and known and used, the most common one is Moshe. Moshe is Moses in the Bible. Let me tell you a very short little bit about Moshe. Moshe was raised in the palace of the Pharaoh. Pharaoh's daughter found him in the river because he was supposed to be killed. All Jewish boys were supposed to be killed at the beginning of the book of Exodus. Pharaoh's daughter found him in the river, and she said, Kimin hamayim mishisihu. I am making him Moshe out of the water. The word Moshe or Musa. You know the name Tutmos, Anchmos. Moshe is a royal Egyptian name. Well, Moshe lived in the Pharaoh's palace. He lived pretty darn well. One day, Vayigdal, he grew up, Vayetze el Echov, and he went out to his brothers. He thought of them as his brothers. And Vayar b'sivloisam, he saw how much they suffered. And he saw an Egyptian who was beating a Jew. And he looked around. He didn't see anybody. Didn't see anybody suspicious anyway. There were Jews around. And he killed the Egyptian. And he buried him in the sand. Goes out the next day, he sees two Jews fighting. And he says to the man who's beating up the other man, he says, What are you doing? Why are you hitting your brother? And the man says, I guess you're going to plan to kill me like you killed that Egyptian, huh? And Moshe said, wow, the word is out. The word got back to Pharaoh, his adopted grandfather. And Pharaoh felt this was a little bit too much. He probably thought that his daughter shouldn't have done what she did, but it's hard to say no to your daughter. And this was an excuse. Or it could have been a different Pharaoh. It could have been his brother. In any case, whatever it was, Pharaoh sought to kill him and he had to run away. Because these Jews let it known, he went out. What he did was extraordinary, Moshe Rabbeinu. What he did was amazing. He grew up in the king's palace. He had no reason to go out there, and he saw them as his brothers, and it bothered him and it saddened him. The first thing that we see him do is commit an act of murder. Of course, saving someone's life, so it's not exactly murder. But the point is, the people who turned him in were Jews. He ran away. He was homeless. He ran away. He was homeless. He was taken in by somebody. He was a shepherd. He was a nobody. He didn't want anything to do with Egypt whatsoever. He gave up on his mission. Well, something interesting happened. He's going with his flock, and he sees this really weird sight. Apparently, there's a bush that's on fire, but it's not being consumed. And he says to himself, we have the supposed quote from his own heart. He says, Asura, I'm going to have to turn aside here, ve'ere, and have a look at this. He had a curiosity is what he had. What's going on here? Why isn't it burning? And then the Bible says that God saw that he was curious, and he turned aside, and God came down and spoke to him. And God said, well, things are pretty crappy for the Jews in Egypt, and you're going to be the one to take them all out. And Moshe did not want it. He argued with God over and over and over and over again. He says, first he says, who am I? What do you, it doesn't even make any sense to him. Bear in mind, his firstborn son was named Gershom, because Ger Hayisi Be'eretz Nochria. Egypt was a foreign land to him. He had no interest in going back, and the Jews did not treat him very well. He said, Vehein lo yaminu li. They're simply not going to believe me. Eventually, Moshe is not allowed to enter the promised land. What was his sin? His basic, let's say, sin. He kind of still held it against him. He never quite fell in love with the Jewish people the way he did when he first went out there and risked his life to save somebody. Oh, he did everything right. But when they start complaining again and again and again, his life is in danger from them, God says, speak to the stone. I give everything, I create everything. Speak to the stone, it'll give forth water. Moshe screams at the Jews as rebels and hits the rock. He got tired from people coming to speak to him all day. It wasn't a joyous thing, so he took his father-in-law's advice. Moshe speaks to the Jews as Tarchechem, Rivchem, Masachem. And the next thing you know, if you look at the beginning of Devarim, the next thing is, well, these people come forward, he appointed them as leaders, and they go out and they spy out the land of Israel, and they come back and they say, we can't do it. It comes down to confidence. Vehein lo yaminu li. Well, I got clapped on the head about 2 years ago. And I got a message that seemed divine. I'm not saying that it is. In fact, I don't really even think it is. But could be. So, that is why I have this YouTube channel. And that is why I am speaking to you and I'm asking you to spread this. I want to be back in the conversation. Or at least I ought to be back in the conversation, according to what it was decided. Daber b'nei Yisroel v'yiso.